Hey everyone, Weston Summers, and this will be a video on just reloading equipment. There will be no active reloading in this video. You have to save it for another one. So with that, let's get started and see if we can tell you a couple of those things about the equipment you'll need to get into basic reloading for rifle and pistol ammunition. First off, we're going to start with what's called a press. Now this is a single stage O-type press. Some are in the C configuration and do not have this piece, and some are in what's considered a progressive press, which when you function the ram or cycle the ram up and down one time, it does more than one step and it twists and you have all your dies set on it at a certain time. Okay, next you would progress over to what are known as your dies. Now these are the meat and potatoes of reloading. These are determined how big your shell is, how long it is, and all the above. Now this is a set of rifle dies for .308 made by RCBS. This is a set of pistol dies for 40 Smith & Wesson made by RCBS. And this is a set of 3 Lee dies for the .223 Remington. Now you're probably asking, why does this have 3, this have 3, and this have 2? Well, we're going to go over that. This one, when it comes to rifle dies, you usually only need 2 dies. You need what is known as a decapping die and full-length resizer. As you can see, this is the decapping pin, and this pushes the primer out as you cycle a shell through it, and it full-length resizes, which means it brings the whole piece of brass back down to the exact measurements it was when it was first made. After you do that and you prime your bullet and you put some powder in it, to put a projectile in it, you use what is known as a seating die. And a seating die is a hollow tube. It doesn't do any sizing, and it has a little piece of metal in here at the top that, as by you move this bolt, it changes the length of how deep it seats the bullet into the shell. Okay? When it comes to pistol dies, it's a little different. This is a set of 3 carbide dies, which means it doesn't require lubrication because it has a carbide in it. But with straight wall pistol casing, it involves one extra step. You start off with your decapping die and full-length resize, which you can see it's very short for a 40. And then you move to what is known as the expander die. Now the expander die is nothing special. It has a shallow ball end piece of metal inside of it. If I can get the light just right, you'll see it. And when you force a 40 shell into it, or any of your other straight wall pistol cases, instead of the shell being straight up and down and cone shaped, it causes the end on the very lip to expand just a little bit, allowing you to put the bullet in and get it started where it doesn't shave off lead and can go down into the casing. This is only for shells that have where the casing is the exact same diameter as the bullet. Then when you got done doing that, you would set a bullet on top of it and you would move back down to your seater die, which would just push the bullet into the shell the exact depth so that it will cycle through your rifle. Or your pistol in this case. Now you can swap out, and these are little rods right here. This one's for like a very pointy shell if you're going to shoot a 40 cal. And the one I have in it right now, if you could see inside here, is very flat, and it's for loading lead bullets with a very blunt nose. This is a set of 3 Lee dies for the .223 Remington, which is one of my favorite rounds. You start off with all the same things you get with your basic 2. You have a full-length, nope, I picked up the wrong one. You have your full-length sizing and decapping die, which you can see the pin right there that knocks out your primer. You move to your seating die, which I just picked up first and made a mistake, and you adjust this. You would screw in to make it shorter and screw out to make it longer. And then you sometimes have the option when you're using a progressive press. This is known as a powder through expander, sometimes just a powder die or all the above. This one does not have the expander part to it. What this die does is if it was screwed into a progressive press and you had all your dies set up here and they were turning in a circle, or your table was turning down here as you cycled it, there's a piece of metal in here that moves up and down. And if I shake it, you'll hear it. Now what that would mean is on a progressive press, there would be a large cylinder of powder sitting above this and a little rod sitting right in the tip. And as you cycled this up, when there was a casing sitting in your press, it would move the piece of metal up, causing the powder to fall into the case and save you a full step of going through and putting powder in every cartridge. Okay. Next, you move on to what is known as an auto prime. This is a Lee auto prime. There's RCBS auto prime and all the above. Now, you can set up your old presses right here to work for priming. You would set a primer seater on this little piece that pops out right here. You'd have a long tube of primers that sticks out, and as you fed it, it would click one in there, and you would push down on it, and it would seat the primer into the shell one at a time. With the Lee Auto Prime, you take off the top. You can put 100 or more primers in here, and as you look at it, this is the number 4 shell holder. If I can get it to go in here with one hand, you would seat a case onto it, and as you actuated the primers would actuated this lever, it would push the plunger forward, and it puts a primer in each case. This saves a ton of time, is very safe. It allows you to point the primer away from your head, away from your face, and makes it a lot better for you. Okay, well, these two little packages you see right here are known as shell holders. One is for the universal shell holders for your press, and one are universal shell holders for your Lee Auto Prime, which is shown right here. The Lee Auto Prime shell holders are slick on the back because all they do is just slide right into the tip of the primer. When it comes to your shell holders have a very large lip on the bottom, which is used for when you come over to your press. You can clip them in or out, and they catch on the springs in your press, holding them in place so that they don't move around. You can turn them, and they can be taken in and out. Now, if you go to either one of these, and you look at your chart, there will be a chart on the back here. And this is a chart telling you what numbers correspond with all the different calibers of every bullet. Now, these sets of Lee will come with most of the normal calibers for things such as .308, .30-06, .223, .45-70. But if you get into really small things like the 5.7x2.8 or the .32 ACP and things like that, you have to buy a specialty shell holder. It's just one of the ways they've got you. Okay, next we move over to what is known as the powder thrower. Now, this is an amazing thing. Instead of you sitting here and spooning out little pieces of powder the whole time, you put powder in this reservoir, you rotate this up and down one time after you set it to the correct charge weight, and it throws powder out of this cone, which a shell can sit right into. You can do hundreds of casings at any time, just standing here holding them. Now, most of the time these come with two different things. One is for rifle and one is for pistol. Now if you look at the pistol, you'll see it's very shallow. This would be seated up in here, and if you screw it one way, it becomes deeper and allows you to throw pistol powder, and if you screw it the other way, it gets very shallow, allowing you to only throw, half grains or more. When it comes to the rifle one, I have already taken the liberty of loosening an Allen screw so that I can pull this out first try. As you can tell, the rifle one takes up the entire cone in here, and as you screw it, it gets shorter or longer, taking up less space because rifles take a lot more powder. Now, a number one tip for your powder thrower is always keep your powder at the same level if you can. Once you load several rounds, put some more powder in here because there's this thing known as case head pressure or head pressure. And what that means is the gravity from the powder here pushing out the bottom is not the same as the gravity pushing from here down. And it will cause a lot of variation in the powder you throw when you go to weigh your charges. If you keep them all the same, everything comes out nice and groovy and they stay very close. Now, after you throw your powder into what is known as your little measuring cup here, or this is just a powder cup, and you put it on what's known as a scale. Now, this is a standard bar scale. This is not a digital scale, and I've been reloading a long time, and I still prefer the bar scales. As a matter of fact, we've had several friends come over, and they'll bring their digital scales, and we'll weigh charges and put them on here, and they won't come out to be the same. They'll have a lot of variation. Now, what you do with this is you set it to its 0 here. As you can tell, you would adjust this screw to make it go up or down. You would set, this is your tens and hundreds, this is your grains on the end, and this is your tenths. So, for instance, if you wanted to go to 200 grains, which would be an amazing charge of powder, you would go to 200. Then you would have things such as 5 grains, 2 grains, or whatever. Then you'd have your tenths of a grain. That would be 5 tenths. that would be 9/10, and then when you got to 10/10, you go up a grain, you go up a whole grain in powder. Okay. Lastly, some of the small things you would need are things like a loading tray that would be used to hold your assortment of ammunition, and this keeps your shells from falling over after you put powder. And probably the most important thing would be these things known as your reloading book or your loading manuals. Now, this is your recipe guide for making a shell. And just like a recipe guide, you have to follow this one. If you mess up and do too much, you don't just burn your biscuits or burn the cake, you actually end up blowing your rifle. Now, this is a brand new reloading manual. This is a little older manual, strictly made by Nosler. And these are powder manuals that are given out by manufacturers at all the gun stores. You can see this one only includes Hodgdon's, IMR, and Winchester powders. Now, the way you use these are you would open it up to a specific round that you wanted to load. So for here, we'd say we want to load the 300 Weatherby Magnum. We'd pick the size grain we would want if we wanted to load a 200 grain, which is going to be hard for you to see this through the camera. And it would give you a few brief selections of powder and one charge weight to get you started, as well as the COL, which is the cartridge overall length. Now, I recommend picking these up every time because these are the quickest things you can do if you're just going to throw some loads together, and they're the safest because they're the newest research they have out on the powders. If you go to your loading book, which is your reloading manual, if you open to an appropriate page, and I believe I have 223 marked here, you will notice that for just one round, 223, there are 5 to 7 pages of differing bullet weights and different powders. And these not only give you a load, they give you a starting load, and they will give you an end load. They'll give you the max overall length, and they'll give you some recommended velocities, or they'll give you some sample velocities from a sample rifle, like a 22-inch barrel at sea level. Now, if you're experienced, I recommend starting off at the middle because it's almost always proven that a shell gets more accurate the more powder you put in it because you have no airspace in there. But if you're not really experienced and you're a little scared, I would say start at the very bottom and work your way up a grain at a time. And then you can look for powder signs. Now, this only covers just the basics of reloading. And once again, I'm going to give you a view of some of the basic things you would need to start. And after this, we'll be glad to talk about some components and see if we can get everybody on their way to reloading pistol and rifle ammo. Thank you. Please rate and subscribe.